The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selena Mackenzie.
Now think of a teenage victim of a knife attack, or maybe a young girl who's nearly lost her leg in a boating accident. Well, trauma surgeon Sheehan H has seen it all on his operating table. In his book called The Careful Surgeon, he explains how it feels to take the lives of other people into his own hands. Welcome to the show, Sheehan.
Hi there.
So, wow, crikey, you've got to be quite strong, haven't you, to do the job you do?
Well, it's an interesting kind of thought, because obviously, you know, when you sort of talk about the actual events, they sound quite traumatic, and they are very traumatic. So you do have to develop some kind of, you know, way of coping with, you know, what you see and what you have to do and decisions you have to make. And I'm sure that's true in all of our lives, but perhaps it seems most extreme in these kind of situations that are life and death. And I think the book is really a reflection on, you know, okay, well, how do you create those systems? What happens if you don't get that right? And how does it affect individuals?
Yeah. And I guess if we take the first one I mentioned, a teenage victim of a knife attack, that is different to any other, because you're going to have the police around and all sorts, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've just come out from operating on another person who's just been stabbed, and we've got the police around. Oh. And clearly, you know, there's also something more than just the situation of the police being involved and everything like that. You know, the fact that it's been done deliberately, that someone else has taken a knife to injure that person, and, you know, without giving anything away, but quite serious injury of a person I talk about at the start of the book, that also adds another dimension. You know, it's not like this was an accident that perhaps couldn't be prevented. This was done deliberately, and that really affects how you feel about it as well.
Yeah. With the knife attacks, are they generally young people? Because we keep seeing so much on the news about the young people stabbing each other.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at our data and we've looked at the information, and it tends to be the younger people, but it's not like teenagers and kids. It's more sort of 20-somethings. And the good news is, you know, we know that the numbers are going down. So, you know, there's huge efforts, you know, across the country by various different agencies, from law enforcement to, you know, charities, have really kind of helped educate and make people realise that, you know, the danger of carrying knives and the incredible harm that can be done in a split second.
Yeah.
Often, you know, sometimes not intentionally. I think that really has helped. So we are very much seeing the numbers going down. But obviously, you know, one is too many. So there's still lots of work to be done.
But like you say, it might just happen in a split second of anger, but don't carry the knife in the first place.
Exactly that. Exactly right, Selena.
And do these things affect you, Sheehan? I mean, you're obviously a surgeon and you're seeing these sorts of things every day, but it must affect you when you leave work and go home.
So, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in the book, really, is there are two things you have to balance here. First of all, you must be affected by this. You know, as a human being, you might be a doctor, you might have seen this, you know, every day for the last 20 years. But when that person comes in, having had something horrible happen to them, be it accidental or not, you need to be shocked, because you need to maintain that human connection to that person who is probably having the worst day of their life. And that's really important. And what I'm trying to talk about is it's normal to have that reaction, but at the same time, you do have to process it and work through it. You can't just take that with you and add it to your burden of darkness or misery, because you won't be able to come back and do the job. And I try and not take things home with me. And I guess what I kind of talk about in the book is what are the kind of the systems or the ways I have developed myself, and a lot of my colleagues have developed as well, that helps us get through the day and helps us come back to work the next day and the next day.
And can you tell us what those systems are?
So it starts really simply. So it's just first of all, acknowledging that, you know, it's okay to feel upset. Yeah. It's okay to see something and think, this isn't right, I wish this had happened, and to feel that kind of human connection and pity, and acknowledging you have these feelings. And then you have to work out, okay, how can I make those feelings, how can I accept them? How can I accept what's happened? And obviously, partly doing this job, you have to accept that you will see horrible things. And the way I think about it, and the way I wrote about it in the book is, you see lots of dark, unpleasant things, But if you can outweigh those by some really bright, light, wonderful things, then overall the balance is good is better than bad. And so you can walk away thinking, actually, yes, today I saw some horrible things, but I also saw some amazing things. And that's the advantage I have in the career I've chosen, in that as well as seeing the darkest and some of the most unpleasant things that human beings can do and can be exposed to, you also see some of the brightest, most amazing and most loving things. So, for me, I balance that out by thinking about the good things that I get exposed to, the people I get to meet in particular, my patients, some of who are properly inspirational, and the people I get to work with. So, there is darkness, but there's a whole load more light.
Yeah, that sounds great. It balances each other out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things it also does is, that darkness and light, if you're thinking about, one of the things I always wanted was to have that kind of, life experience that felt fulfilling.
Yeah.
And having that darkness and light really helps create that very kind of, a very rich, fulfilling life that you can have in medicine and obviously other careers.
It must be quite rewarding. And I guess when you are seeing people, like you say, some of your patients are really inspirational, it makes you think, well, what am I worrying about a headache for? Or what am I worrying about paying bills for when these people are amazing who are going through traumas?
Yeah. And I think, some of these people are known and some are not known. But all of them, you kind of see the amazing resilience they have and how they face their problems, they overcome them and often, excel. And it's like a bit of magic, really. You see these people and what they do. And, I've got a friend who is a triple amputee. And he is at the moment in Ukraine racing around, raising money for the charity he has set up supporting victims of war. And for me, that is proper inspiration. Just to be near those kind of people and see the incredible stuff they do. A bit of magic kind of rubs off a bit, I hope.
I'd like to interview him. Pass my details on to him. It'd be great to interview. Yeah. Give him a bit of exposure.
He's a much better interviewer than me. He's an amazing person.
You're doing very well. So we mentioned as well the young girl who nearly lost her leg in a boating accident, but you also had a survivor, or probably a few survivors, of the terrorist attack on Westminster Bridge.
Yeah, so when the Westminster Bridge attack happened, obviously that's quite a traumatic event, and people were injured and people got brought to our trauma centre along with our other fellow trauma centres in London. And that was interesting in many ways, because if you looked at the numbers of people injured and the type of injuries they had, it's the type of stuff we do routinely. But because it had been part of a terror attack, it really felt very different. And it really felt very far more emotional than it would do normally. And I think there's something about, again, that deliberate nature, and also the fact it was an attack on our hometown, on people walking down our streets, on our society, it felt. So there were kind of other, emotions mixed in with the looking after the people. And in fact, in many ways, I had to say to people, forget about the other stuff. Let's just focus back on these people as patients, as we would do any other day of the week. There's a risk if we get distracted by the other stuff, we won't do the best job by them. So, it was different, but we got through it, and luckily most of those people did really well. Yeah,
I guess it sort of feels kind of personal.
Very, very. When it's on your own street, and it's, the attack happened on Westminster Bridge. I run over Westminster Bridge, 3 to 4 times a week. It felt very much, in our backyard.
Yeah. I often think about these terrible tragedies like the Twin Towers in America, and I think, well, people like you must have been running around not knowing who to help first.
So we have systems of how we deal with when we have multiple casualties, working out who is the person you need to deal with first. And that's really well rehearsed, well drilled, and, well practiced. So even when on the outside it looks like it's going to be chaos or chaotic, there is always a system at the heart of it that's kind of underpinning what we do and how we work it. So, it's often said you can never really prepare for these things, but you can to an extent. You just have to accept that, whatever preparations you make, what actually happens will be different. So you just have to be ready to adapt.
Yeah, yeah. And how long is the training to become a surgeon, Sheehan?
Probably far too long, to be honest. If you compare, particularly in the UK compared to other places. So I went to med school at the age of 18, and I became a consultant surgeon. So that's basically when they say you are, licensed to practice on your own, looking after your own patients, etc. 20 years later. I mean, to be fair, I took a few kind of just some different and slightly off the road kind of things along the way, because I thought very interesting. But it actually takes somewhere between 13 to 20 years in the UK.
Blimey. And do you think you're not wanting to scare any of your patients, but are you always learning even today?
Well, you are, and that's one of the most important things, because, information changes, knowledge changes, just some of the technologies change. So if you think about any kind of activity we do, you apart from maybe cooking and baking a cake, but anything else in your life you don't do today as you would have done 20 years ago. So it's really important. You are always changing, developing, learning, and making sure you're delivering the most up to the minute cutting edge treatments, because they're often the best. We have this thing of continuous improvement, and we need to be doing that, which means you as an individual need to be continuously changing.
Yeah, there must be massive changes. Sort of, you have to keep going on refresher courses on, for tools, I guess, anything that you use.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but absolutely. So, there are bits of practice that change all the time. But bizarrely, surgery is still, some things we do will be recognisable from Napoleonic surgeons. Some of the things, particularly, some of my more recent experience has been overseas in war zones, in places like Ukraine and Gaza. The type of surgery we're doing there would have been very familiar because of the nature of the injuries, because of the nature of the circumstance we're operating in, and the lack of resource, would have been very familiar to someone operating in the 19th century on battlefield casualties. So some things never change, and bizarrely, some things we relearn.
Incredible. It sounds fascinating. It really does. Well, if our listeners want to hear stories of care, crisis and compassion from a real trauma surgeon, then the book is called The Careful Surgeon, Finding Light, Courage and Compassion in the Face of Life and Death. And it's by Sheehan H. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Absolutely perfect.
Thank you. If people want to find out more about you, because we are selling your book on our website for our listeners, tre.radio. Do you have any sort of website or social media, Sheehan?
So I have very limited social media. Because of the nature of the work I do, I tend not to have too much of a social media presence, which is, you can imagine, drives my publishers and my agent absolutely mad. But but there is a fair amount of stuff on me anyway, online. So I'm sure they can find stuff.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and telling us just a little about your work. What have you got on next? Are you still at work now?
I am still at work. I'm having a little break. We are just waiting for the next patient to be brought in, who's got a injury to their leg. So back at it, and I'll be careful.
Yeah, please do. You're doing an excellent job. Thank you, Sheehan.
Take care now.
Bye-bye. Bye.